Okay, so that should be recording now. If you're just dialing in, we're going through the agenda and topic of today being walking through how the baseline is going to apply some of the changes to connect into the Pan-Canadian Terminology server. Elliot's going to do a walkthrough. If you're catching it now, or if you have the capability of kind of going through in your own guides and performing a similar function, I think our goal is to make this not just apply in the baseline, but to make it possible for folks to take the learnings here and apply them to their own projects as soon as they get that API key, which I know I've had it in housekeeping in the past, but I don't have the link on me right now. And then the other thing I wanted to just put out there was we're in the steps of package publication. So if we've got 5 minutes at the end, I'll just kind of review the package before I click to produce it, make sure it makes sense to folks. We'll have a quick review and 1.2 will be out the door. So I'll just keep an eye on the time, Elliot, if things go over, just to save about 5 minutes at the end.
Yeah. Actually, since it is a light agenda,
yep.
I think Shannon has a topic, if you don't mind passing control over to her.
I can do that. Let me stop sharing.
I seem to just be able to hit share. Will that work?
Yep.
Sorry, guys, I don't usually do this in Zoom. Can you see this?
Yes.
We just have a very quick game to play. So apologies if you're listening to this recording. I don't know, maybe this is a fun thing to listen to. But maybe fast forward 5 minutes or so. So we're so excited and happy for you. And because we all love data so much, we just have a really quick baby shower game with some trivia.
I love it.
I know Joni loves trivia. I feel, Sheridan, like you probably like trivia as well.
Yep. Yeah.
So really quickly, just some lightness for this Friday and to celebrate Sheridan's last day. Got a few trivia questions. So I guess maybe shout it out. I don't know, put it in the chat. This isn't super sophisticated, but so babies recognize their mother's voice at birth. How long does it take a baby to recognize its father's voice?
This is good.
I don't know. I feel my son purposely doesn't.
Elliot, option F, never.
I feel like it's got to be closer, like it's got to be soon because they can hear outside the womb. I feel like maybe A. I don't know. I'm a talkative one in my family though.
Yeah.
So.
All right, I'm gonna reveal the answer. 14 days. I know.
Wow.
I'm surprised by that.
There's probably some, like, depends on how often the father's talking to the baby.
Yeah.
Joni,
There's
come on.
probably some other factors.
When does a baby get its fingerprints? I did know this for some reason. I don't remember why, but.
Is it weird that after having kids, I still don't know this?
The real question is, Christine, do they have fingerprints?
How often do you think about your kids' fingerprints? Probably not very often.
You see them everywhere around the house, so they're at one
That's
point.
true. Stainless steel appliances.
Whose brilliant idea was that?
In your windows.
All right, the answer is as a 3-month fetus.
I figured it was before birth.
So Sheridan,
how do they know that?
I don't know.
Who's fingerprinting 3-month-old
That's Canada.
Were you at the scene of the crime?
On average, how many diapers will a baby go through from birth to potty training?
Wow.
This one resonates with me.
I think I'm going with Joni on this one. I feel like it's got to be 12. I mean,
actually, I'm thinking.
Sorry.
Actually, I realized that A is greater, so I was going to go with A.
I jumped ahead too quickly.
Okay, well, that's not as bad. I heard
large range.
Is there going to be a trivia? So there was one trivia question about how long they last in landfills, and I was like,
yeah, best not to think about that.
Yeah, best not to think about 7,000 to 9,000 diapers in landfills
for a baby.
Yeah.
A baby is born with how many bones?
Okay, I know this one, so I'm not going to say anything.
Oh, wow. I must have not really cared.
I'm going with A.
I promise I am a good mom.
It is A. I didn't know that. And then they fuse together.
I knew that. I didn't know how many, but I knew that they fused together.
Yeah.
That is really cool.
This is the last one, I think, because we know that Sheridan's having a boy. We won't ask you about names, but what was the most popular baby boy name in 2024?
Another year I don't win.
There's no Elliot's not on the list. Neither's Ken.
We thought about using Elliot as a name, and then I was like, no, that's just going to be too weird with Elliot. Like, it would just be too weird.
It's hard once you start going down that road of like people you know or people you knew in high school. Or this actually kind of surprised me. The answer is Noah.
Yeah. So
That's what I said.
Really?
Joni, good job. You are the trivia master.
No, I only got one question right. Two
Oh.
questions right.
Well, you guessed like 100 times for each one. So.
I guess once for each one and twice for one of them.
All right, that's all I got. But congrats, Sheridan. We're so happy
Thank
for you.
you. Thank you. And we're not 100%, like I'm a big fan of like, you got to see who the kid is, but we're thinking maybe first name of Julian.
Nice.
Ooh, I like it.
Yeah, so we'll see. We'll see what he comes out like if he looks
So
like
not Lloyd or Graham.
Not Lloyd or Graham.
Oh my
Sorry,
God.
Lloyd, if
Brian
you're
had
watching
some
this.
say, I'm guessing.
What can you say? But yeah,
Like-
maybe that'll be like second or third child.
Jules?
Jules. Yeah. Actually, that was like one of the reasons I really liked it. So
My daughter's name is Maya, and I kind of feel about Julian the same way. Like it's like not uncommon, but not super common. Although Maya's far more common than we thought it was. But we kind of wanted that middle of the road.
My name is super uncommon now.
Yeah.
Oh
Well,
yeah,
it's coming
Joan is a
back.
very uncommon name now.
Mm.
But I feel like Joan is like they've had a resurgence.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I will say, when we told the nurses Joshua's name, they went, "Oh, a boy with a J name." I'm like,
Really?
okay. Yeah.
John, Jack, Jeff.
Yeah.
So my brother, I'll leave it at this one. My brother's name is Hannibal. And he was born 6 months before the movie came out.
Oh no.
And my mother said, so they gave birth at a Catholic hospital, and the nuns will come around and they'll provide support at that time. And they say, "Oh, what's his name?" And she said, "His name is going to be H. Cameron Cook." And they're like, "What does the H stand for?" And she said, "Hannibal." And they said, "Cameron is such a nice name."
And does he go by Cameron or?
He goes by Hannibal, actually. Yeah.
Oh wow.
Wow.
Yep. So it ended up fitting in a really good way, but yeah.
I think it's funny because I weird, I guess, in a way, but I gave my daughter such a religious name. I'm not very religious, but her name is Trinity.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, I love her name. But her middle name is also Faith. So
It is? I didn't know that.
yeah, there's a whole backstory to that. I'll tell you about it when I'm in Toronto next week. But yeah, her name is Trinity, and I just always love the name, and yeah, it is what it is.
Yep.
And she goes to Catholic school, so people are like, "Oh, your mom must be so religious," and I'm like,
in name only. Yep.
"In name only."
Well, thank you guys. That is so sweet. Honestly, I want to be like, I can't wait to come back, but I know everybody's pushing me to like take the time. So I'm going to take some time and be back when I'm back.
Lorraine was also involved in this plan. So she can't be here today, but I would be remiss if I did not mention
So
it.
Lorraine, if you're listening, thank you. I'm sure we'll talk sometime between then and now, but oh. So without further ado, Elliot, do you want to do the walkthrough of the terminology configuration settings?
Sure.
I hope it's as fun as trivia.
Oh, I'm sure it will be.
There'll be trivia at the end. Do you remember which file folder we were supposed to save that file into?
Okay. So let's start here and blow this up a little bit. Okay, people can see?
Yep.
Okay, so this is tx.fhir.org. This is HL7's terminology server to support FHIR. Okay, if we look at the TX reg endpoint, it has all of the terminology servers that HL7 is aware of, or their ecosystem includes. And until recently, it was really tx.fhir.org, and that was it. Over the last year, HL7 has started putting, I wouldn't say putting pressure, but they've been encouraging affiliates to stand up their own terminology servers. Part of this is the effort on HL7 HQ, and whether that's Graham or Rob Howsam, to keep these servers up to date. But also, they only put things on tx.fhir.org that are sort of internationally applicable. They don't have Canadian terminology.
Do they have Australian terminology?
It's the
tx.fhir.org.
Oh, on tx.fhir.org.
No.
Okay.
No. So over the last year, Australia got into this. Canada got into it. France got into it. And just recently, I see HL7 is here. These are the terminology servers that will be queried if you're using any of the standard HL7 tooling. So primarily that means the validator, the HL7 validator, and the IG publisher, and anything that's built on a variation of that. So there's a whole bunch of things that use the validator deep in their guts, and so this would apply to those as well. So if we look in here, we can see that we've got the HL7 Canada configuration. It says here's the URL for the server, and it will claim that it is an authoritative server for any code system starting with https FHIR-info-inforoute.ca/code system. It will claim to be authoritative for the Canadian edition of SNOMED CT, and for these value sets. So any value set under info-inforoute.ca, or any value set based off of the SNOMED CT CA. So that was adding these servers in was something that we were working on since the fall, since actually it was a CA baseline call that we kind of went, hey, we've now got a terminology server in Canada, let's see if we can use it, and ran into problems. And so Infoway and their service provider and Graham and me all sort of worked together through the fall to get this working. And just before Christmas, we got it going. So that was great. One of the interesting things, it doesn't actually show up here, is that the Canadian terminology server is not totally publicly accessible. Anybody can hit tx.fhir.org and do a query against it, and not have any concerns. The InfoWay terminology server, on the other hand, just paste this in here, does require you to agree to their terms of use and licensing. Do we still have Ken on the line?
I put the API request form that Ken shared in the last meeting in the chat. I think Ken is.
Well, you're just getting ahead of me. Yeah, this page describes the terminology server. There is a page about getting system access. So not per user access or not interactive user access, but this is for system to system. If we go there, which actually, sorry, not that it matters, is described here. And start at the top of the page. There's a whole bunch of discussion here, which for our purposes, you can all ignore. This is for doing things like systems that will sync the data sets. But way down at the bottom, it says accessing the terminology servers with an API key. And so you need to use this URL, and all the calls need to include the API key. And then, yes, as you pointed out, there's a system access form. So you just need to fill this out, and InfoWay will get you a key. Check off API key here. Okay. Once you have that API key, what you need to do is in your home directory, there's a .FHIR directory that contains all the downloaded packages that the IG publisher uses. It also contains, let me just, it's got two things. It's got a FHIR settings.json file, and then it's got all the packages. You can look at packages there, and these are all of the things that it's downloaded right now. The FHIR settings JSON is described in a Confluence page on the HL7 website, which I forgot to bring up. But you list the servers, you list whether you want to use additional NPM package managers. So if you're doing your development in a corporate environment where you can't go out and hit the regular FHIR package servers, or you want it to be able to find your own packages which you haven't published, you can add in an NPM package server and several others. But for our point, our use today, what you are doing is you need to set up and say, here's a server. The type of this server is a FHIR server. They don't specify terminology servers as different than regular FHIR servers. An NPM server has a different value in here. The way you authenticate is through an API key, and here is the value for the API key. Again, I'll paste that into the chat here.
So, Elliot, because this is at your .FHIR level of your like folder structure, this will apply to all the implementation guides that you have?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And so so this says, whenever I contact this server include an API key in the HTTP header. And I did a build of the baseline, and we should be able to do some fun QA. If you look at after you do your build, there's a QA-tx.html in your IG. And this shows you all of the requests going to all of the various terminology servers. And so here's one going to the InfoWay server, and you can see there's an API key being provided in that. Yeah, Randy, it is an active key, and sure. Yeah, I could disable it. I could get a new one, but I'm not too worried about this community.
All 2 rewatches of this video will get it.
Exactly.
I would just recommend it to protect the server from somebody trying to use that approach.
That's true. Yeah.
I mean, we did have that period of time where our meetings were getting crashed, so.
Okay. I'll talk to Kenner and Neil about the new one. Yeah. So yeah, we can see the API key being provided. If I were to do a build and put in another invalid API key, we'd be getting back 403s, 401s, something like that.
I think 401s, because right now the QA log for the baseline says 401 not authorized before the terminology settings are applied.
Yeah. Yeah. So basically what happens is one of these, there's, you get a request to the terminology server for, wrong one. Oh yeah, here. Here's a request to the terminology server in terminology mode for the capabilities. That comes back and lists all of the code systems that server supports. And then the fact that we've registered certain ones as InfoWay being authoritative for, it knows that if it needs that particular code system to go to InfoWay to get it, if there are no authoritative code or authoritative terminology servers, what will happen is that we'll go to anyone that has that code system available. And there's something similar that happens with value sets. So that's really all there is to do. Once you've got this file in place, it just works. So any of your calls to a, anytime you build an IG, if it references a InfoWay value set or code system, or tries to make use of SNOMED CTCA, it will hit the InfoWay server and do the expansions and download and everything from there. So beyond that, you don't need to do anything in order for that part to work. I will say, though, the other thing that you might want to look at is in, where is it? Oh, we're looking. Where's the capability statement?
I don't think we have one in the baseline.
Or, sorry, not capability. CA baseline XML. There we go. We aren't using it. Ah, you don't have it in this one. Okay, hold on a second. Let me discard those changes. Switch over to a different branch. And let's look again. There we go. I've added in a path expansion parameters parameter to the IG. And this says that when you are expanding a value set, pass in these parameters the parameters from this file. And if we look at that, what that's got is it says, if we are using SNOMED CT, use SNOMED CT CA. So this makes sure that all of our expansions use the Canadian version rather than international or US. You don't need this. If you don't have this in there, by default, it will use the international version of SNOMED, which may or may not be what you want. But I've got this in there in my branch of CA baseline. This is a separate issue than the authentication and the fact that we are using the InfoWay server. But I mean, you could have this in there even 6 months ago, and it would use the version of SNOMED CT, the Canadian version of SNOMED CT that's on the HL7 server. Now, because InfoWay is supporting it, we're getting the Canadian version from the Canadian server. And hopefully we'll do a better job of keeping that up to date than Graham and Rob were able to, just based on their time. So what else do we want to see? What's the value of this? We can do things like, let's see. Okay. I'm going to make that an invalid API key. And I'm going to rebuild this test implementation guide. When you make the change and you put this configuration in place, you probably want to blow away your terminology cache. So the contents of input cache cache / tx cache, because when you build by default, it grabs locally. And if we've already got an error, we can't get this code system, or we can't get this value set because it's not authorized, it will keep that. It won't recognize that the configuration for the terminology server has changed. So it'll just use the old one. So we need to delete this directory before we do it. This implementation guide.
This,
sorry.
Will you show, because I know I'm looking at a version of the QA report online that has the error from the terminology standard service / TX FHIR. will we expect to see that error then now show up in your local build? Because you're basically invalidating the API key right now.
Yes. Yeah. So I should be able to do. Okay, so this is my
I think it
test.
shows up for medication on the CI build version.
Yeah, so here it's trying to expand two different value sets, and it's saying unable to find these things. And if we go and we look at the value sets, yeah, it says can't expand it. But if we put this back and we delete all of those directories again, and we rebuild, it should remove those errors. And so this should allow us to get rid of, a bunch of those value sets that we've got in CA baseline that just say, here's the content of another value set. Or where we've actually gone and we've directly included a value set, an info value set in CA baseline. We shouldn't need to do that anymore. Now, this works at the implementation guide level. Technically, it can find it, it can see the content. The one thing missing right now is the ability to click on a canonical URL that for a value set that's supported by the terminology server, and go and see the expansion, the definition of the value set itself, just following the canonical. But I believe InfoWay is working on addressing that. Okay, so we've rebuilt. This time we have 0 errors. Let's just double check. There we go, no errors here. Very good. And if we look at the value set, we see that it went to STOMED CTCA and did this expansion. So that's what we can get out of the integration of the terminology server, the Canadian terminology server, into the FHIR ecosystem. Any questions?
I have one, maybe we'll have other people think of theirs. So this is if you're building the guide locally, but because we can only, our GitHub repository only includes files and folders for the project, the application of like that FHIR settings won't impact our CI build, right?
Okay. So we have given 3 API keys to HL7. One for Graham's personal use, one for my mind's gone blank for a second. The fellow he's got helping him with some of the development work. No.
Josh?
Nope.
Google.
Nope.
We're gonna start naming everybody.
Shout random names at Elliot.
That's our next game of the
David
day. Right?
Otasek. Yeah, David Otasek. And then a third one for the CI auto build.
Okay.
So the auto build knows how to connect to the Canadian terminology server. And so if you are, for CA baseline, whenever we push a change, it can use the Canadian terminology.
So if we pushed the changes most recently and they're now in CI build, I'm still seeing an error on medication in our CI build QA that says effectively error code system pair must be, oh, maybe it has access, but it says error code system pair must be provided. Um, wondering if that's distinct from I don't have access to the terminology server. I bet you it is because I saw one that was on medication earlier today that was distinct and showing like a 401 when you didn't have the API key. Yeah. So this is probably just an error in the examples as opposed to an indication that the CI build can't interact with the terminology server.
I would agree. I think it's also very likely, I mean, this is not the Canadian edition that it's hitting. So in this case, we might be dealing with an issue of trying to use a code that is not in the international version, which the other thing I pointed out would deal with this expansion params file.
So then should that expansion params file be pushed up into the CI build version of the guide? Okay.
I expect so, yeah.
Cool.
Unless we want it to be resolving against the international version of SNOMED CT, which I don't think we do. So,
I don't think so.
yeah.
So that was my question. What other questions do people have? Randy, Thomas, do you feel like you've seen enough about the updates to the file that like in your own builds that you'd be able to utilize the same process?
Oh, that will be the decision from the management. And so far, I cannot see this. Well, this is a very good presentation. Thank you much. And besides, I will say so far, we're just waiting for the management decision. I'll do connect to it. But I definitely will bring it back to the project team for their consideration.
Yeah, and even just like troubleshooting things too, right? And trialing the process, I think can be helpful in our local builds.
Yeah, definitely.
Information to help, so.
And I'm not sure, I assume that it can be implemented, the configuration files on the submit as well, right? Which is the setting.json can be implemented. Have you tried on the simplifier engine or just on the IG publication?
Oh, I have had discussions with Ward about them supporting this. I don't know where they are. I don't think Simplifier yet supports additional terminology servers, but I don't know. That would be a good question for us to ask them. Yeah. They haven't asked for I have not been involved in a request for an API key for them. So I would assume no, but then again, I'm not going to be involved in all API requests, API key requests. Wouldn't expect to be involved in any.
Thank you. Since actually this is a, how to say, the conversation within the InfoWay governance structure, I would say, is there any InfoWay representative in this meeting or maybe sitting on the other meetings?
Yeah, I'm here.
And be informed, and so that they could incorporate or collaboratively working to see this possibility to have this terminology validation process built inside the simplifier engine, because my understanding, InfoWay does have that contract which paid service from simplifier engine services, right? Just personal opinion from president, because we always count on Simplify Engine to work on our own use case specific business on the FHIR design part. Thank you. Yielding back.
Yeah, I was just gonna add, yeah. Well, I'll certainly bring it up with the folks from FHIR on our next regular call to see, what they have in mind. But yeah, I think obviously it's some integration, some form of integration between what's on Simplifier and the terminology service makes a lot of sense. Because right now we are dealing with a lot of kind of stopgap solutions and having kind of these stub value sets that kind of work as a go-between at the moment. But yes, I'll definitely keep that on our radar, and I'll make sure to update our PTs and other implementation partners on any progress we have there.
And you guys were successful in incorporating it into some of the validators that were part of the projectathon, right? So like,
yeah, for sure.
Like every tooling suite's a little bit different, but the idea is that like the process of the API key and the terminology settings has also been expanded into other types of tooling suites.
Yeah, like you said, we were able to get the Matchbox engine working with the terminology service by using the exact same methods that Elliot demonstrated here. Updating the dot FHIR file, or sorry, the FHIR slash dot
settings.
Yeah, the settings file. Exactly this. And so during the connectathon, we were using live testing against the terminology service.
Yeah, and in the lead up, that wasn't working. But if I recall, all it took was updating the engine behind the Matchbox service to use the latest validator rather than an older version of the validator, and then it just suddenly picks it up, right?
Yeah, I wasn't involved directly with that work, but yeah, I can get information on that if folks are interested in how we got that working.
Yeah. So anything that uses the happy stack should pick this up immediately. Yeah. So that's what I got for you. I will say I learned some interesting things as I was going through this process. Let me just. So there's the QATX output file. There is also TX servers output file. And that one was kind of fun. In that this shows you where it's looking for various code systems and value sets and who supports things. So kind of helpful. You're not usually going to need to look at these things, but if you are having problems with how the terminology is working, before I started this process, I had no idea that these were even there. Between this one and this one that shows every single API call. So, yeah.
That's very cool. I'm just thrilled with how far we've come in what, 6 months in terms of knowing that the terminology server was out there and having some desires and requirements for like how we'd like to utilize it in baseline to actively being able to like now, effectively have that validation occurring and the expansion occurring for our guide is fabulous.
I just saw there was an international council meeting earlier this week or last week, and we got listed as, integrating into the terminology ecosystem as one of the accomplishments of the last year. So, or since their last meeting, so that was a good thing to see. But yeah, and it was a lot of work from Graham, because adding the authentication actually meant having to rewrite a lot of the code stack to be able to pass through the API key and things. And then Dougal Fleming and Mark, what's Mark's last name? From Daedalus, their efforts to get this going was really helpful.
So with that in mind, Elliot, are you able to kind of push the commits that you've been able to test and show us into the CA baseline? Should we wait for 2.0?
That's up to you. I've got a bunch of potential changes. Simply putting in that config change or the expansion parameters, I think would be a pretty simple one that would fix a couple of errors. So that one's not a bad one. I don't know that I'd go further than that within the 1.2 scope, though.
Yeah. Well, not within 1.2, because that was going to be the last thing on today's agenda, which is hopefully packaging 1.2. Maybe. I've been wanting to get it out for a couple months now, and finally, but maybe for 2.0.
Certainly, yeah. 2.0, definitely. Let's talk about getting these things in. We should probably do a ticket for them, but yeah.
Perfect. All right. Yes, and big kudos. Ken was giving you, Elliot, kudos in the chat. Elliot was instrumental in getting this getting this working. I remember you kicking this off on a late Friday night. Truly masochistic but benevolent Elliot.
Well, it was I'll just set up a little proxy on my own machine. Oh, I'll just do this. And it kept getting more and more complicated. But it's great that it actually succeeded.
No, just thrilled with it. All right, I'm gonna steal the screen. Yeah, don't get any ideas. Trust me, I won't. I am not that masochistic. All right. Can you guys see? I've got our simplifier package view up.
I think I'm still sharing. Let me stop that. There we go.
All right, can you guys see it now?
Yep.
All right. Just for your awareness, earlier today there was one other technical correction and the update to indicate 1.2 in the guide that we had put in since our last few rounds, and it was just a procedure. We were getting that slicing error that it was applied on procedure code, not code coding, so that was a quick change. Those changes went in. You might have even, if you follow the baseline and subscribe to it, you might have even gotten the email. They went in 20 something minutes ago, which means that because of the webhook that we have set up, everything now that we are reflecting as 1.2 online in the CI build has now been ported over to Simplifier. So we are ready to make the 1.2 package. This is what I have for the release notes. I just wanted to go over it with you folks because I know I'm probably going to be missing some things in here, but I wanted to reflect back on the just significant effort that went into getting 1.2 out the door. We knew that it was going to be kind of the release that we got before the really, really, really big lift. But in reality, like there were so many technical corrections and improvements that went into this release. So I've tried where possible to just go through the GitHub commits and list any of the issue log items on Simplifier that were flagged for this particular release if you guys are interested. I am going to, because we use the bake process, I'm just going to, out of sheer caution, I'm going to put out a pre to begin with, and then we'll just take a look to see at the output. Everything looks like we want it to, and then we'll put the official 1.2 at the door. But everybody comfortable with this, like from a release notes perspective, just to give people an idea of what changed between 1.1.8 and 1.2? Anyone not comfortable with it, I should say? Big push. Okay. Then I'm going to publish what we have. We're relying on our bake package right now in the background. Doesn't like prescribe it and a pre-adoption extension, which is interesting. We'll have to take a look at the diagnostic report. This one I expected. This was the one that
Yeah.
we'll look at. And why we always do pre-packages. So if I look at this, let's take a look. So package index, some things that I typically will look for is because we had a problem for a while with it not including the differential and not rendering, or sorry, not including I think it was the snapshot for a while. So let's just make sure that those got added on. And then we'll take a look at diagnostic report. My thinking is that how large this file is, it's likely that the snapshot is here. But we'll see. Yep. Okay, so that's getting added on. And let's take a look at that diagnostic report to see if it messed with anything. So it didn't like this. This is the pre-adoption extension for diagnostic report. I wonder if it's because we should have a dependency on the extension or the extension registry, but let's take a look.
I don't know that the canonical will have the 5.0 in there.
This one. It's just interesting that it didn't pull up on the actual.
Diagnostic report, what?
Yeah, it didn't show up on this QA. No, I think when you're pre-adopting an extension, you're supposed to put 5.0.
Ah.
Sorry, when you're pre-adopting an element via the extension, you're supposed to, this is the more specific. But let's take a quick peek at the dependencies.
It could be that simplifier doesn't take into account the pre-adoption rules.
I've seen it, we've pre-adopted things I thought for other projects though. Let me just see. This was the one that was giving us guff about. Remove the dependency. Let's see if that changes it. I might have chosen the wrong option for the dependency. Yeah, I think I did. Let's try it with the R4. Cross version extensions? I can't remember if that one's old. Yeah, that one's old. Just try the R4. If this doesn't fix it and we have to live without, I think that would mean that was the only pre-adopted thing. What are the impacts of having this error? I mean, I think it would just get stripped out, right? In our 1.2 package.
Well, I think it's just saying that it can't find that definition. If somebody else has that definition on their server, go ahead. You can, not going to cause a problem.
Yeah.
It's just that Simplifier can't find it when validating all of the canonicals that it knows that are being referenced.
And it isn't stripping it out here, which is good.
Yeah.
So with that in mind, then, are we okay putting the official 1.2 pre-release out the door?
I think so. It's not going to harm anything. At the worst case, there's an optional extension that nobody can use.
Yep.
So don't use it.
Okay. Anybody opposed to packaging under 1.2 official? Okay. And I will do that. I just want to actually get my release notes. And then we'll unlist the 1.2 pre. And then we'll announce that we finally got here to 1.2 6 months later. All right.
You've gotten very familiar with Simplifier. I couldn't be jumping around it that fast.
Oh, well, I just got everything prepped before the meeting. Okay. Beautiful, beautiful. All right. So all we'll have to do now is just unlist the pre one and we should be good to go. So if you haven't, please do try to update your dependencies if you're ready to 1.2 and let us know if you run into any challenges. And if you do that are the result of the package, we'll get them resolved through a bug fix if that's the case. But I feel we're pretty far along at this point in packaging. So to those that stayed on, thank you, thank you. I will see you guys on the other side. I think you guys will see Lorraine next week for governance, talk about communication channels for changes in the baseline, particularly like canonical, going over to be communicated to other implementation guides. And I just want to thank you all for being such a wonderful community.
We're going to miss you.
You're very welcome.
Yeah.
If you need any advice, ask Joni.
Done. Done.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Peter.
guys.
Ask me, the person who hasn't had any kids?
I'll say
Good luck.
plenty